You know, as educators, we're always preaching the gospel of persistence, right? Never give up, push through it. But what if that's only half the story? In today's Explainer, we're going to dive into the research of Dr. Sudendra S.G., who gives us a really powerful framework on a topic that's surprisingly tricky, the art of letting go. And more importantly, how we can guide our students to know when it's actually wise to walk away.
So let's just start with this, a brutal truth. No matter what a student is trying to learn, or what any of us are trying to master, you will eventually hit this wall. It's that awful, frustrating point where you feel like you're going nowhere, and all that early excitement just evaporates. We've all been there.
All right, so for our first section, let's talk about the student's brutal truth. We're going to get right into this idea of the inevitable dip.
The author Seth Godin actually gave this universal feeling a name, the dip. And while we love to celebrate people who push through it, we also have to face the fact that sometimes a path is just the wrong fit. The real challenge for us is figuring out the difference. So here's the big question for every teacher. Is your student in a temporary valley they just need to climb out of, or are they staring at a total dead end?
To really wrap our heads around this dilemma, we're going to turn to some really timeless stories. We'll start with a heavy hitter from the epic Mahabharata, the story of Bhishma. And the question is, was his life defined by a noble vow or a self-inflicted curse?
So here is the story. As a young man, Bhishma takes this extreme vow to never marry, never rule, all to make his father happy. Seems noble, right? But he held on to that promise his entire life. He clung to it so tightly that he stood by and watched as injustice took over his kingdom, feeling like his hands were tied by an oath he made decades earlier.
And this just hammers home the danger, doesn't it? Bhishma's stubborn persistence, his refusal to rethink a path that was clearly causing harm, was a major reason things spiraled into the catastrophic war of Kurukshetra. His persistence actually became destructive.
Okay, so that's one side of the coin. Now let's contrast Bhishma's story with another great figure, this time from the Ramayana, sage Vishwamitra. He teaches us a totally different and maybe even harder lesson about what real wisdom looks like.
Vishwamitra was this incredibly powerful king, and his one goal was to become a Brahma Rishi, the highest level of sage. He tried everything, performed incredible austerities, and he kept failing, time and time again. And why? It was his own baggage getting in the way, his anger, his pride. He'd get so close, and then his ego would flare up, and poof, back to square one.
And when you put these two characters side by side, the contrast is just wow. You've got Bhishma with his blind, unwavering vow that completely ignored reality and led to ruin. And then you have Vishwamitra. His greatness wasn't in his stubbornness. It was in his ability to stop, look at his failure, and realize, okay, this isn't working. I have to change my approach. He had to conquer himself first.
This brings us to a final, really beautiful metaphor from the Upanishads. It's a little story that perfectly captures this whole idea of choosing the right path for the right person. It's the parable of the salt doll. It's a very simple story. There's this little doll, made entirely of salt, and it wants to understand the vastness of the ocean. So it walks up to the shore, takes a step into the water to measure its depth, and the moment it touches the water, it just dissolves. It becomes one with the very thing it was trying to measure.
And there it is. That's such a critical lesson for us as teachers. For some of our students, pushing them down a certain path won't build them up. It will dissolve them. If a particular subject or career goal is just eating away at their mental health, their core values, their joy, they might be a salt doll in the wrong ocean. That's not growth. That's erasure.
In Indian philosophy, there's a specific word for this skill we're talking about, viveka. It means discernment. It's that critical wisdom that allows you to tell the difference between what's real and what's not, what's a productive struggle and what's a dead end. And it's a skill we need to help our students develop.
So, this isn't just some high-level philosophy. This is where it becomes really practical for us in our classrooms and lecture halls. How do we lead with strategic wisdom? How do we actually help our students cultivate this viveka?
Well, here's a 4-step framework. First, help the student figure out what kind of dip they're in. Is it productive or is it a dead end? Second, don't just give them instructions, guide them with questions that make them think for themselves. Third, and this one is huge, Help them reframe the idea of quitting. It's not failure, it's a strategic pivot. And finally, help them find and feel good about a new path, what you might call their swadharma or their true calling.
This is probably the most empowering thing we can teach our students. Their time and energy are precious. Making the choice to walk away from a path that is fundamentally wrong for them isn't failure. It is an act of incredible strategy. It's an act of liberation.
And we'll leave you with this profound thought from the Bhagavad Gita. Maybe our most important job as educators isn't to create students who can perfectly perform a task someone else set for them. Maybe it's to help each student find their own duty, their own unique path, and give them the courage to walk it, even if it's imperfectly. The question to think about is, how can you help your students tell the difference between the dip and the dead end?